Good morning/afternoon, everyone. Let's not sugarcoat it. Your ego is in the way, not your past, not your talent, not even your circumstances. The thing slowing you down, tripping you up, and keeping you stuck is that loud, fragile, defensive ego. And I'm here to tell you, most people go through life wearing a mask they've forgotten they're even wearing. They walk into rooms, into conversations, into relationships, operating not from who they are, but from who they think they need to be. That mask, that's ego, that's the shield we build to feel strong, to feel accepted, to feel like we're in control. But here's the truth nobody tells you often enough: your ego is not your identity. The version of you that shows up just to defend, to prove, to control, to impress. That's not your core self. That's just your ego trying to protect itself from being exposed. See, your identity, your real identity, is rooted in values. In character, in the way you love, the way you grow, the way you choose courage over comfort. It's found in those quiet moments when you don't need to impress anyone, when you're fully present, when you're creating, serving, listening, not performing. But ego doesn't like that. Ego likes performance. Ego wants applause. It feeds off validation. It whispers, you need to be seen, you need to win, you need to be the best in the room. And while that might get you short-term attention, it never gives you long-term fulfillment. Because fulfillment doesn't come from proving, it comes from being, and here's where the trap comes in. Society rewards ego. It celebrates the loudest voice, the fastest talker, the person who can dominate a room. You scroll through your feed and it's full of curated highlights and confidence that borders on arrogance. You start to believe that maybe, just maybe, if you don't show up with that same kind of energy, then you'll be forgotten, dismissed, left behind. But let me remind you, the people who truly lead, who truly inspire aren't the ones showing off. They're the ones showing up, authentically, humbly, consistently. You don't need to build a bigger ego to make a bigger impact. You need to build a stronger identity, one based on purpose, not performance. Ego says, look at me. Identity says, this is who I am. Ego says, don't tell me I'm wrong. Identity says, tell me so I can grow. Ego needs to be right. Identity needs to be real. And if you're serious about evolving, if you're serious about becoming the highest version of yourself, you've got to know the difference. I'm not saying ego is evil. Ego serves a function. It was built to protect you, especially in moments where you felt unseen, unloved, or unsafe. In fact, a lot of ego gets built in childhood when we learn to get praise by being the best, by being smart, by performing well. That little spark of I'm only valuable when I achieve turns into a fire that eventually burns your peace, your relationships, your growth. Because when ego's in charge, you can't be vulnerable. And if you can't be vulnerable, you can't be real. And if you can't be real, you'll never truly connect with others or with yourself. Here's the most dangerous part. Ego doesn't just block connection, it blocks clarity. You start making choices not based on who you are, but based on what your ego thinks will impress people. You take jobs for the title, not the mission. You stay in relationships to prove a point, not to build love. You say yes to things you don't want because your ego is afraid of looking weak. And little by little, you drift away from your real self. You forget what actually matters to you. You lose touch with what lights you up. You start chasing success on someone else's terms, but you don't have to keep living like that. When you separate your ego from your identity, you take your power back. You start choosing with intention instead of reacting from insecurity. You start listening more, defending less. You start showing up with confidence, not because you need approval, but because you know who you are even when nobody's clapping. And that's real strength. This is your invitation, not to be louder, but to be clearer, not to perform more, but to connect deeper, not to fight for your ego, but to reclaim your identity, because the world doesn't need more ego. It needs more of you. If you want to grow, if you want to evolve, if you want to reach your next level in life, you're going to have to confront one of the biggest blocks in your way, your ego. Most people think that time is their biggest problem, or money, or lack of support, but in reality, one of the greatest barriers between you and who you could become is the version of you that refuses to admit it doesn't have all the answers, that version of you that gets defensive, that avoids feedback, that wants to appear polished rather than curious. That's ego, and ego does not want growth, it wants control. See, ego is always trying to protect you, not elevate you. That's why it clings to what it already knows. It will fight for your limitations, it will argue for your current level, it will resist anything that even remotely threatens its sense of superiority or certainty, because ego is fragile. It doesn't want you to explore the unknown. It wants you to stay in your lane, stay comfortable, stay safe even if that lane is leading you in circles. And growth, real growth, that doesn't happen in the safe zones. It happens in the stretch zones where you're challenged, where you feel the friction, where you're exposed to new ideas that might disrupt your current beliefs. You ever notice how hard it is for some people to take feedback? The moment you offer a suggestion or point out a better way, they shut down, get defensive, or start explaining why they're already doing everything perfectly. That's not strength. That's not leadership. That's not confidence. That's ego trying to survive a moment where growth is actually being offered. It's tragic, honestly, because every time you reject feedback, you reject improvement. Every time you defend your limitations, you deny your evolution. And if you want to reach higher levels in business, in health, in love, you have to become the kind of person who loves feedback, who seeks it, who says, what can I learn here? What am I missing? Most people don't realize how often their ego is keeping them stuck. It's the reason they keep repeating the same patterns, staying in the same mindset, and tolerating the same problems. The ego says, I've got it handled, even when everything is falling apart. It doesn't want to admit it's struggling because that feels like weakness. But here's the paradox. The people who grow the most are the ones willing to admit where they're still learning. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Growth starts when ego steps aside, when humility enters the room. When you say, I don't know everything, and that's exactly why I'm going to keep getting better. Let me tell you something, you don't get to level up by defending your current level. You get there by surrendering your need to always be right. You get there by asking better questions. You get there by being a student again. You get there by being willing to fail, willing to look silly, willing to risk being uncomfortable in order to become unreal at what you do. Ego will tell you that you have to be perfect, that you can't show weakness, that people will only respect you if you look like you've got it all figured out. But that's a lie. People respect authenticity. People connect with progress. People are drawn to leaders who are real enough to admit they're still becoming. Ego wants status. Growth wants substance. Ego is loud. Growth is focused. Ego reacts. Growth reflects. So if you're feeling stuck, like you've hit a wall, like you keep running into the same problems, it's probably not because the world is against you. It's probably because your ego won't let you pivot, shift, or receive the help that's right in front of you. And that's hard to admit, but that's the first step in breaking through. So ask yourself, am I coachable? Am I curious? Am I willing to be wrong? Because the fastest way to grow is to want to grow, to value improvement more than validation, to trade being impressive for being impactful. Every breakthrough you want is on the other side of that choice. Your next level is waiting, but it won't meet you in your comfort zone. It's outside your pride, beyond your perfectionism, past the fear of being seen trying something new. And the only way to reach it, fix the ego, open the mind, grow anyway, when it comes to relationships. Whether it's your romantic partner, your team, your family, or your friends, your ego is either building bridges or burning them down. And too often, without realizing it, ego is doing more damage than we like to admit. The truth is, the arguments you're having, the disconnection you feel, the tension that never seems to go away, most of that isn't about communication styles or personality differences. It's about ego stepping in and making everything a power play. Ego wants to win. It wants to be right. It wants the last word, the sharpest comeback, the highest ground, but in that pursuit, it kills connection. Most people don't wake up wanting to sabotage their relationships, but that's what ego does quietly, consistently, and in ways we don't even recognize until it's too late. You think you're just making your point, but you're actually shutting someone down. You think you're standing your ground, but you're actually building walls. You think you're protecting your pride, but you're wounding the other person in the process. Ego will make you defend yourself even when you're wrong. It will make you attack first just to avoid being vulnerable. It will convince you that apologizing is weakness, when in reality, it's one of the greatest signs of strength. If you look closely at the most painful moments in your relationships, ego is usually right there in the middle of it. Think about how many conversations went sideways because someone needed to be right instead of being understood. Think about how many apologies were delayed, or never given, because ego said they should come to me first. Think about how many times you could have healed something faster if ego didn't get in the way and convince you to keep your guard up. That's the cost of ego. Prolonged pain, unresolved conflict, and broken bonds that never had to break. Real love, real leadership, real friendship. They don't come from being the loudest or the smartest or the most dominant in the room. They come from humility, from presence, from compassion, and none of those can fully exist when ego is in control. Because ego doesn't listen to understand, it listens to respond. Ego doesn't ask questions, it makes assumptions. Ego doesn't give the benefit of the doubt, it keeps a scoreboard. But the best relationships aren't scoreboards. They're collaborations. They're places where we can be real and messy and honest and safe. And ego doesn't create safety, it creates distance. Let's be real. How many people have you pushed away because your ego wouldn't let you say, "I was wrong"? How many opportunities for deeper connection have passed you by because you had to win an argument that didn't need to be a battle in the first place? How often do you show up to a conversation already wearing armor, already preparing for a fight, instead of simply showing up open? If you're not careful, ego will turn every conversation into a competition. And suddenly, you're not on the same team anymore. You're just two people trying to outmaneuver each other emotionally, and nobody wins that game. Here's what most people miss. Fixing your ego isn't about letting people walk all over you. It's not about shrinking yourself or avoiding conflict or pretending everything's fine when it's not. It's about choosing growth over pride. It's about stepping into a relationship with the maturity to say, I value connection more than being right. I value resolution more than revenge. I value us more than I value my temporary need to feel superior. That's what fixing the ego looks like in real life. And when you do that, when you start approaching your relationships from a place of presence instead of pride, everything changes. Conversations become calmer, arguments become productive, trust starts to build again. People start opening up because they can feel they're not being judged or manipulated. They're being seen, and once people feel seen, they show up differently. That's how you build real bonds. That's how you create teams that thrive. That's how you turn tension into trust and disconnection into unity. Fixing your ego isn't just personal development, it's relationship repair. It's the path to becoming the kind of person who makes others feel safe, heard, valued, and inspired. It's the path to deeper love, stronger partnerships, and a level of emotional intelligence that turns conflict into connection. The moment you stop needing to win every interaction, you start winning in ways that actually matter. So if something feels off in your relationships right now, don't just look at what they're doing. Ask yourself what your ego might be doing, because when you fix that, when you shift from ego to empathy, you don't just fix the fight. You elevate the entire relationship. Every next level of your life is going to demand a different you, and not a louder, flashier, more ego-driven version, but a clearer, more grounded, more intentional version. Ego might get you in the room, but it won't help you grow once you're there. It won't help you build legacy, deepen your impact, or create something meaningful that lasts. Greatness doesn't come from ego. It comes when you kill it. Because ego will always try to take the spotlight, but greatness Greatness is forged in the shadows, in the quiet discipline, in the humility to keep learning even after you've succeeded. The ego tells you that success is about being the best, that you have to prove yourself, that you've got to be the smartest person in the room, that you can't ask questions because that makes you look weak. But that voice is lying to you. The real winners, the ones who go far and last long, they aren't showing up to impress. They're showing up to grow. They don't cling to old wins, they don't rest on titles, they don't hide behind bravado. They're too focused on becoming who they need to be to let their ego stop them. That's what greatness demands. What most people don't understand is that ego is heavy, it's armor, it's exhausting to carry. When you operate from ego, everything is about control and perception. You can't admit mistakes. You can't pivot easily. You're constantly posturing, constantly managing how people see you. And that takes energy away from actually doing the work, serving the mission, or building something meaningful. Ego says, protect the image. Greatness says, do the work. And the work will always require more from you than your ego is willing to give. There's a reason most people never reach their full potential. It's not because they're not talented or smart or capable. It's because they won't let go of their ego long enough to evolve. They're stuck defending who they've been instead of stepping into who they're becoming. They won't start something new because they don't want to be seen at level 1. They won't ask for help because they think they're supposed to have all the answers. They won't take risks because ego is obsessed with certainty. But growth doesn't live in certainty. It lives in curiosity. It lives in the unknown. Look at the greatest leaders, creators, athletes, or thinkers of all time. The ones who lasted, the ones who kept reinventing themselves, the ones who didn't just have a moment. They had a movement. You'll find a pattern. They weren't driven by ego. They were driven by purpose. They didn't need to be worshipped. They needed to contribute. And when they got knocked down, and they all did, they didn't crumble because their identity wasn't built on ego. It was built on mission, on vision, on discipline. That's why they could keep showing up long after others quit. That's why they kept leveling up when others plateaued. Because they weren't attached to who they used to be. They were committed to who they were becoming. If you want to unlock your greatness, you've got to stop asking, how do I look? And start asking, how can I grow? You've got to stop needing validation and start seeking truth. You've got to be willing to be a beginner again. To look stupid sometimes, to admit you don't know, to fail publicly, that takes courage, but that's the path. There is no greatness without humility. There is no mastery without curiosity. There is no breakthrough without the willingness to first break down what no longer serves you, including your ego. You have to be more committed to your future than you are to your pride. You have to be more in love with progress than you are with being right. Because the moment you start protecting your ego more than you pursue your evolution, you've already lost. But the moment you say, I don't have to be perfect, I just have to keep becoming, everything opens up. Your creativity expands, your relationships deepen, your leadership sharpens, because you've finally created space for real growth. So let the ego go, drop the act, quiet the noise. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You just need to become the version of you who's ready for what's next. That's how you unlock greatness, not by being louder, not by being right, but by being real, being present, and being committed to growth over image every single time.